Welcome to our Inspiring Thoughts podcast. We're very lucky on this edition of the podcast to have Joe Banks with us. So Joe is a peak performance coach, author, speaker, and leadership and development trainer. So Joe, it's great to have you on board.
Oh, very welcome to be here. I'm really happy. I'm excited.
Yeah, great. So today we're talking about narcissism in the workplace. So Joe is a specialist in that area. So I've asked Joe to come on today. Joe's already had 7 questions from me from just some preparation so that we can really get into that sensitive subject. But before we do that, Joe, would you mind just sharing with our listeners your career history? So a brief kind of part of your career history.
Yes, absolutely. So I had almost 20 years in HR, got to that senior level, but I know you probably have some HR people on here, but I did not love HR. I was spending a lot of time conflict managing, as we do, heavily unionized environments. And I was coming up to a big birthday, not revealing my age, and just decided this is not what I wanted to do. I was really incredibly unhappy. So I actually left, resigned, bold move, because I knew I wanted to set up my own coaching business. I've always been interested in human potential, in just supporting people. And one of the roles that you have as a senior person is dealing a lot, especially at that senior level. It's very political, it's smoothing relationships over. And I always really enjoyed that. So I thought, right, I'm going to go and be a coach. So left my big job, went and did a load of retraining. So I did NLP, master practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming, CBT, exec coaching. Oh my goodness, huge toolkit. Started off working with execs because that was the kind of level that I was working at. But because I predominantly work on behavioural change, they were coming back to me and saying, oh my goodness, this stuff you're doing with me is great. Can you do some training? So fast forward 14 years, I've got about 8 or 9 books, more in the pipeline, online training courses. I have corporate clients, private clients, and I do that whole range. Predominantly now, I do a lot of training around bullying, narcissism, that side of things. I do a lot around resilience, mental toughness. And I just have a range of clients across a range of sectors and absolutely love what I do. Love it.
And before we come on air today, Joe and I were talking about our careers and how we both love what we're doing at the moment, and it can really shine through. And I connected with Joe. The reason why I asked Joe about coming on today is I saw a training session that Joe did, I think December, Joe, about narcissism in the workplace. And I thought it'd be really good just to go through some questions today and have a chat through. Would that be okay with yourself? We'll go through the questions and see where we go.
Perfect. Let's do it. Yes,
Wonderful.
absolutely.
So the first question, and it was a new word to me until I learned a couple of years ago. What is narcissism? What is it, Joe?
Well, I think, there's a lot of people don't really understand what narcissism is. We use that word and throw it around all over the place without really understanding, oh, he's a narcissist, she's a narcissist, without really understanding what it is. So there is a diagnosis that people can get, narcissistic personality disorder, but that has to be a clinically diagnosed title.
Yeah.
But that has to be done by a psychiatrist or somebody who's professional at doing that. And the thing is with narcissists is they are never going to admit that they've got a problem. So it's very unlikely that they're going to go and get that diagnosis. However, in the terms that we're talking about today, we're using loose traits that we see because there are very certain patterns of behavior that we see in narcissistic type people. Now, I want to be really clear right from the outset. All of us have some narcissistic traits, all of us. So we will go through the traits because I know that was one of your questions, but we all have some of those traits. And just because you have some of those traits does not make you a narcissist. It's the patterns of behavior that we look out for. So does that clear that bit up?
Yeah, and I think it's really good to kind of be loud and clear straight away that we all have some of those traits.
We do.
We all have some of those traits. It doesn't make us necessarily a narcissist, but we do have some of those traits. So I really appreciate you kind of putting that straight out there early on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah,
really good.
It's the kind of when we talk about it, we'll talk about the cycle. It's where we see these certain patterns of behavior that would lead you more to thinking that that person has that narcissistic bent, if you like.
Yes. Yeah, no, great. And what would you say kind of the key traits, or what we would notice as a person that's definitely kind of in that narcissistic cycle, etc.? What would you say the key traits are?
Okay, there are quite a lot. And actually, if you want to do any research on this, HARE, HARE, you can have a look at Hare's psychopathy checklist. And there are 20. That's about psychopathy. And, you know, as we said to begin with, not all narcissists are psychopaths, but all psychopaths are narcissists. So Hare has a psychopathy checklist that you can check against, but these are the ones that I see the most frequently. So there are grandiose self-worth. So people who kind of put themselves out there as if they're amazing with very little substance underneath. So we tend to call, there are different types of narcissists as well. So I'm just going to, before I get to the traits, just let me cover the two main groups of. So the first are the ones that are quite overt and they're out there, and you know, they present themselves with this grandiosity and look at me, aren't I amazing? But there's also what we call the covert narcissists, and those people are more likely to be victim. They tend to be like in a victim mode. Oh, poor me, things always go wrong for me. But actually the underlying stuff is very similar. So they may display differently with those two things. So they may act slightly differently, but the underlying narcissism is there. So just wanted to point that out. So grandiosity is one, superficial charm, that's quite one for the grandiose. Some of the biggies are they lie with ease and have absolutely no issue lying whatsoever. And I think that's what confuses most of us the most, because, you know, typically we talked about values before we started recording, and values is big for most of us. And so I'm not lying is huge for most of us. It's a real integral value. Not for a narcissist. They will lie. They have no empathy. Zero. So they don't care even remotely how they're impacting you. They're two of the biggest. They are highly, highly manipulative, and both overt and covert are highly manipulative. They move things around, say, do whatever they need to meet their needs. They never take responsibility, and that's a big one. And that, I know you want to talk about gaslighting, but in gaslighting terms, that's the underlying thing. They are never going to take responsibility. It's always someone else's fault. And they have this kind of big need to control. They need to control other people. And one of the things that we did say at the beginning of this, again, before we started, before we press record, is it's really important. And this has helped me because I've had narcissistic people in my life. I coach people who have had narcissistic people in their lives. And one thing that is really important to point out, these types of people are typically have really low self-esteem, really low self-confidence. They have feelings of unworthiness, of shame, and it could be because of how they were brought up. They were potentially bullied by a parent or somebody in school that's made them feel like that, or they copied that behaviour from a parent. So that's really important, because I know that helps a lot of people who've been victims of narcissistic abuse, is knowing that actually that person is doing that not because they're better than you, but deep down they feel unworthy, inferior, and that can be a big tool in recovery.
Yeah, and going back with you said there, because it's fascinating to understand. And I think a lot of our listeners will start to resonate today and go, oh, wow, that's happened to me. And this is what I've gone through with work, and kind of those light bulb moments, but in a positive way, because it is serious damage to that person on the receiving end of those kind of
Very much.
behaviours. But does it start, as you said there, is it starting from when people are younger and then it's built up through the years, or could it be a trigger later on in their work life? Could it
No,
be any time it happens, or how's it
no,
usually work?
not in my experience, and not in
Yeah,
the, I've been researching this for 15 years now in depth,
yeah,
and I train a lot of people on this, even therapists, because a lot, even some clinical people don't know very much about narcissism. But in all of the research that I've done, we have got the nature nurture
yeah,
thing, and there's a lot of research being done around that, but it tends to be, it isn't something that comes on all of a sudden. It's
right,
something that usually that stems from childhood. So either born that way,
yeah,
with that kind of bent towards that, but then the surroundings that they're born into foster it.
yeah,
Or they just watch. They might have had a narcissistic
yeah,
parent, so they watch and copy, which is what we all do. It's how we
yeah,
all learn and to be who we are and the values that we have. So it can either be they had somebody very overbearing
yeah,
who, made them not feel great, or they copied, or
yeah,
probably a mixture of the two.
yeah, yeah.
It's
And
unlikely to develop later, very
yeah,
unlikely.
and what would you usually see there? It's probably a strange question, but what would you usually see a person demonstrating narcissism is the benefit they get back by being in these different traits or behavior? What is it usually they, or why would they demonstrate these behaviors?
They do it to build themselves up. So by
Right.
putting other people down,
Yeah,
they build themselves up. And that's the same with any bully, narcissism or not.
yeah,
The whole reason that people bully is because they feel unworthy. They have low self-esteem.
yeah,
So if I can put you down and make you feel bad and make you feel unworthy, I build myself up. And
right,
that tends to be that underlying
yeah,
need for them to build themselves
yeah,
up by putting other people down.
yeah. It's
They
kind of
also
like,
get what we go on, sorry.
sorry, no, carry on, carry on.
They also have, with narcissists, what we call narcissistic supply, which is a really odd term, but it's when they see somebody else suffering, and this is going to sound so crazy because to us that are not narcissists, you
Yeah,
simply cannot get your head around that. But this narcissistic supply is like air for them. So when they put somebody down, when they make somebody feel bad, they get a buzz, they get a thrill. So
right,
a dopamine hit
yeah,
from almost it's glee
yeah,
from the pain that they are causing other people. And
yeah,
to normal people
yeah,
who don't have that need, it seems just crazy. But narcissistic supply, so that pain they cause other people, is a delight, and it's like air, it's like breathing, it's like food for
yeah,
them. They need it to survive.
yeah. It's like a fuel to them, isn't it?
Fuel.
Yeah,
100%, and they cannot live without it. They
yeah,
cannot live without it.
yeah. And as an individual, if you're on the receiving side of working with a narcissist or what would that colleague be experiencing? So if
Okay.
you're on the receiving side of that, what would you be experiencing, and emotions, etc., would they be going through, Joe?
Okay, well, before that, it's probably important to talk about the behaviors that you're going to see from this
Yeah,
person.
great.
And we call it the narcissistic cycle of abuse. And it's a very laid out, very well researched, very documented. You can easily Google it,
Yeah,
narcissistic cycle of abuse. I've written extensively about it on my website. Basically, it starts with, and this is the same for a narcissist outside work as well. So we will obviously focus on work, but if you think about this in terms of personal relationships as well, it fits. The first thing is love bombing. So in the love bombing phase, it's typically that the person will want to ingratiate themselves with you really quickly. And this happens quickly. So what they're trying to do, you might hear things like, oh my goodness, I wish I'd found you before. We're so aligned. This is amazing. I've always wanted to work with somebody like you. They all of a sudden kind of share the same hobbies as you. They like the same things as you.
Yeah.
They don't really. What they're doing is getting you off guard, and they're doing what we call data mining.
Right.
Sounds very calculated, and it is. So their data, so you let your gut, because you think, oh my goodness, this new boss, this new colleague, they're amazing. I really align with them. They feel so amazing. Blah, blah, blah. So you let all your barriers down that would usually be there when you meet somebody new, because they are mirroring you. And they're really good at that. So that's the first bit, is love bombing. That tends to be quite a short period. Then we move into the bit that's really quite insidious, and we call that devaluation. So they can't keep that love bombing up for very long. It's not something that it takes an enormous amount of energy for them to do that. But then quickly it starts to move on to the devaluation. This is where they start putting you down. They will be the odd comment here or there, but there'll still be some love bombing. Then it'll be a bit of a put down again. I never said that. I didn't do that. Where's that piece of work? Taking credit for your work, gaslighting you, which I know we're going to come on to, and just generally leaving you confused, wondering what the heck is going on. Where's that? What's happening all of a sudden? But it's that slow erosion that is really damaging. It just goes on and on and on. And what tends to happen there as well is, during that time, they are setting you up to fail. They are what we call triangulating. So they're bringing other people in as well to side against you. So they will have singled you out probably, and everyone will be really scared of getting on the wrong side of them. So they join forces.
Yeah.
And then everybody seems to be kind of coming down on you. We also call that flying monkeys as well, when they're running back and telling him and talking to you and running back, or her, because it's male and females. But it's those put downs, they're setting you up to fail. It's all of that. And it's that stuff with the gaslighting, which we'll talk about in a minute, that really gets under your skin, that really starts to wear away your self-confidence. And this can go on for years, this bit.
Yeah.
So, really tough. The next phase is discard. So that's usually when you are so depleted and that you just can't focus anymore. You just are almost a shell of yourself. You think, what's the point? Nobody listens to me. They have got every bit of your energy and your will to carry on. So at that point, then from a work perspective, it will look like they won't include you in important communications. You won't get invited to meetings. You'll find that the whole team's gone out for dinner without you. That's sort of the behavior when you've got to discard. It might even be them moving you out of the company or moving you out of their team. So that, that's kind of, it can take months, it can take years to get to the discard. However, if you get tired and fed up of that at some point and you start to stand up for yourself, there'll be the next phase, which is Hoover. So they're going to want to maintain their reputation, and they're going to do anything they can to maintain their reputation. So they're going to start saying, oh, let's bring you back on side. Let's go out for lunch. Let's do this and let's do that. And they'll do what we call future faking. We'll talk about a promotion. We'll talk about you getting involved in other projects. We'll talk about, because all they're intent on doing is getting you back online, because they're not looking good, because you're threatening to leave, you're threatening to tell HR, you're threatening to tell your boss. So they need to do something quickly, and then they start the love bombing again. But the love bombing will be short and they'll go very quick, and it just keeps going round until they exit you or you exit. So I know that was quite long-winded, but it's really important, because if there isn't that cycle, they're not necessarily a narcissist.
Yeah. And I think that'll resonate with a lot of our audience to go, wow, that's happened to me. and I've gone through that cycle
Yeah.
from that purpose, and it's amazing. I was just smiling because yes, it has happened to me, so I've
Yeah.
experienced it in my
Yeah. It's happened
career.
to me.
But you just sit there and go, oh wow. And I suppose the $64 million question, Joe, is why do people do that then? So they do the love bombing, then they change their behavior to show you up, etc. Why do they do that? It's,
Narcissistic supply. It's the
that's
supply.
just a
They
supply.
get it's the supply. Because every time they see you being defeated, every time they see you being upset, unhappy, sad, that's hey, it's
Yeah,
all good stuff for them. And I know it sounds so crazy, but that's the reason. It's narcissistic supply. They are building themselves up by putting you down. And one of the questions that I get is, who are their targets? What type of people do they go after? Well, they can go after anybody, but they take great glee in doing this to people pleasers. So people who are, really good, well liked, people who are very professional, they take great joy in bringing down people whom they perceive to be better than them, but they'd never say it out loud. So somebody who's very well liked, somebody who's very professional, if they can bring somebody like that down, the supply, the
yeah,
narcissistic supply is multiplied.
yeah. No, it's fascinating. It's
But actually,
fascinating,
when
isn't
they've
it?
brought it's just,
Yeah,
it's madness. But when they've brought you down that much by the devaluation, that's when they're more fun anymore. They can't get a rise out of you anymore. They're not getting any more supply out of you, and that's
yeah,
where the discard comes in.
yeah. And then that's the new person or the new
And the
part
new person, yeah,
they
oh,
go on to
absolutely.
feed that supply. Uh, yeah,
100%. They have found a replacement for you. And
yeah,
that's the same in personal relationships and in a work. They've found somebody else who is brand new and sparkly that
yeah,
they can start all over again
yeah,
with.
yeah,
And actually, one of the things that we talked about is quite often narcissists will never let go. So
right,
years after, they might drop into your inbox. And
yeah,
they do that because when they do that, they know you're going to get some sort of adrenaline and
yeah,
cortisol response, that stress response. And that gives them a little bit of narcissistic supply.
yeah,
So that's why sometimes you just cannot get rid of these people. And I'll talk to you about how we do that a little bit later, what the best way to deal with
yeah,
them. But that's why even years later, they're still dropping in your inbox.
yeah. Still trying to get that supply
Oh,
again.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
So you might get a text from them. They might drop something in your inbox, or, get
yeah,
somebody else to do it. One
yeah,
of the flying monkeys, one of the triangulation people
yeah,
because it's a game.
yeah,
Life is a game. Sounds
yeah.
incredible, doesn't it, when you say it out loud that these people are out there, but they
Yeah.
are.
But I think the bit now is saying it out loud is having people the confidence to actually face into it and understand, rather than just being in silo and actually taking it on board and hurting themselves more. It's actually having the confidence to talk about it and listen. And that's why I wanted to do the podcast today. So going back to the question I asked, but what other behaviours would a person receiving on the other side be experiencing? What could they be experiencing? I know we said we've gone
So how would
through,
they feel?
yeah, how would they be feeling and what would they be going through their minds?
So you would feel degraded, unlistened to, unimportant, like all of your values are being violated. And we know that that is a big issue for most of us. We have strong values, and to have somebody completely have no regard for you whatsoever, and to make up lies about you, and to undermine you at every, and especially in front of other people, they like to do that. They like to put people down. They like to make people scapegoats in front of others. They get a lot of glee out of that. So, you might be in a team meeting, and that person will be being really cruel towards you. So you go into yourself, you don't want to stand up for yourself, you feel sick, you don't know what to do, your fight, flight, freeze response is up there. Stress, might lead, if it goes on a long time, it can, because I know I've experienced it myself. You start to question everything about yourself. And that's one of the saddest things. And that's one of the things I put in one of my posts, is the fact that, you can have had an unblemished career and being so incredibly well thought of. And all of a sudden, this person comes in from nowhere, completely tries to decimate your career. And it leaves people feeling huge lack of confidence, like they're worthless, like all of the things, funnily enough, that are going on underneath the narcissist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're trying to really bring you down and take away your shine, your professionalism, your authority. They want to undermine you in any way they can. So that's how you would be feeling, and I've worked with people who have just been, I've got to give up my career. I need to just go and do a quiet job somewhere else. And it's like, oh my goodness, you've worked 30 years, you've got this amazing career. And this one person has come in and decimated it.
Yeah.
So it's about them helping the person see what's happened, because actually that awareness is huge, and then helping build their confidence levels back up again.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to there, Joe, about the awareness of actually understanding these traits, these behaviours, and actually what you're going through. And actually, it's not the person on the receiving side, it's more the issues with the person that is the narcissist, to try and understand in your mind, isn't it, to try and get across that it's not about you as the receiver, it's about the other person trying to put it onto you or take those things away from you, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And don't forget they lie, and they're manipulative. And so if somebody higher up than them did happen to pull them up on that, they'll say, oh, I've been nothing but wonderful to them, because they'll do a lot of this as well. They will obviously do it in public, but with a team that they feel secure with.
Yeah.
But a lot of this can go on behind closed doors, and they present themselves as being this amazing, wonderful person. So all of a sudden, people are not believing you, because they're believing this person who lies, because most of us think people would not barefaced lie.
Yeah.
But they will. They will. Yeah. So, yeah.
But as it goes back to all the work and research you've done over your 15 years, you said it's not just a subject we're all going to get overnight, but it's about understanding it more. This is about kind of the idea of the podcast that we can all start to relate to and understand. And recently, it's probably a bit naivety of me, but I was trying to understand. I saw some words like gaslighting and phrases around that, and I wasn't sure what it actually meant. So would you try and help us understand what gaslighting is, Joe?
Absolutely. I hear that term used. It's another one, like narcissists and gaslighting. They're thrown around all the time without people really without people really understanding what they mean. Gaslighting is one of the main tools of a narcissist, because remember at the beginning I said that one of the main thing is not to take responsibility for anything. That is their overarching aim, is to get away with as much as they can and not take responsibility. So with gaslighting is their way of turning the tables, of kind of turning everything back on you. So they will change the subject quickly. So you bring something up with them, they'll change the subject quickly. They will turn it back on you. One of the favourite ones is, well, what about the time you did X, Y, Z? And it's like, hang on a minute, we dealt with that years ago. Why are you still bringing that up? Well, all of a sudden, they've taken you. It's a way of taking you off topic. So it will be putting it back on you. It will be, what about that time you did that? It's blaming you, blaming other people, blaming anybody else but themselves. So I've actually kind of, in preparation for this, I've printed off some of the typical sayings that we hear. So if you'll just bear with me, I'll read those out because it's probably quicker. I never said that. You're making it up. You're the liar. It's you that's lying. You made me do it. If you weren't such I wouldn't have had to do this. I was only joking. You just don't get my sense of humour. Or, I don't remember that. That didn't happen that way. That's you, that you're just making stuff up. You're crazy. You need to see somebody. There's something wrong with you. So it's this kind of putting it back on you. So the whole idea of that, and this is how I know without a doubt if I'm being gaslit, is if I feel confused.
Right.
If somebody makes me feel confused and makes me think, what's that? Did I say that? What's that me? To something that I have a really clear recollection of, but all of a sudden they make me feel confused. Whoa, that's the hugest red flag.
Yeah.
Or if I'm telling somebody something that happened to me, and usually a person that isn't a narcissist would have huge empathy and be able to completely empathize and say all of the right things. A narcissist can't do that because they don't have empathy. So if you're telling them something that awful that happened to you or your parents or something, and they just go, all right, have you got that report ready? And you think, oh my goodness, I've just told you all of this awful stuff that's happened. And they just can't register with that.
Yeah.
So that's gaslighting.
Yeah, and it's fascinating just listening to that about creating doubt in that other person's mind. That confusion, that doubt is really pulling against it, isn't it? And I love the way to help our colleagues on the podcast today about if you're feeling confused, that's usually like a red flag going up of I'm being gaslit, and kind of to be aware of actually what's going on. And I love the way you shared the phrases there, because there's some common ones I've heard before that people try and throw you off topic. So they'll throw back something that happened years ago and you go, well, where did that come from? Or how did that happen? That is fascinating to actually kind of hear, but how they really try and create doubt and push into that doubt confused element, isn't it?
Yeah. What they're trying to do is get you off topic.
Yeah.
If they can get you off topic, and they do not care how they do that.
Yeah.
If they can get you off topic, because how many arguments I've seen a lot of arguments with people with narcissists. I've had arguments with narcissists where they'll drag something up from a long, and then all of a sudden all the focus is on that thing that happened years ago, and the thing that you were meant to be dealing with has been forgotten because they have blown up again about something that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's just that classic diversion. It's that kind of throwing you off the scent.
Yeah.
That's what's happening there.
And the connection between it, just so I get clear in my mind, is it from a narcissist they gaslight, or can gaslighting be done by anybody? Or is it?
I suppose anybody can do it. We can all do that. Yeah, it's kind of a tool that we could do if we thought, oh, I don't want to deal with that right now. So we could all do that, but it is just a number one tool for the narcissist, because as I say, they have no intention of taking responsibility for anything. So if they can blame shift, which is what their past masters are doing, they're going to blame shift. And because we're just not used to people barefaced lying, that's where the confusion comes in, because we don't expect people to do that.
Yeah.
We don't expect people to, we expect our values to be the same as other people's values. And one of those is honesty. But with narcissists, there is no such thing.
Yeah. And it's going back there. I love the phrases about values that, we all have. Majority of people know right from wrong. Majority of people know how to speak to each other, etc. But what they're quite happy to do is cross those values, which I just love the way it confuses any person that's going through this to go, did I say that? Did that happen? That's the confusion, isn't it?
And while you're being confused about that, you're kind of already off topic, aren't you?
Yes.
You've already shifted things because all of a sudden you're doubting yourself.
Yeah.
But it's that doubt and that confusion that causes the most damage. So that all of this tends to happen in that devaluation phase. And like I've said, that can be a couple of years, or maybe even longer in personal relationships. And so you can see where that constant doubting of yourself, if you're being made to constantly doubt, that really wears down who you are.
Yeah.
Changes your personality.
And I think, just before I go into the next question, I've seen people over the years that their personality has changed rapidly. So I know we talked about kind of fight, flight, freeze. There's also fall, where people fall away from themselves. And I've seen that over the years, where actually they've been a very chirpy, very popular, but then they've gone very insular, they've drunk more, they've ate more, those kind of things, that how damaging it is to their own physical health as well.
That's part of the freeze, as in
Yeah.
fight, flight, freeze. So they're what we call numbing activities.
Yeah.
So they're self-soothing, numbing activities to kind of go within yourself, Netflix binge, drinking, all of those things that you said. Yeah, that's the freeze aspect of fight, flight, freeze. And you also see fawn, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Because at first, you know, especially if you're a good person, and which most people are, or you're a people pleaser, especially when somebody starts to be mean to you, you're going to bend over backwards to be nice to them and placate them and bring them back on side. And so they love that in the beginning. They love that. After a while, they see that as very weak and they don't like it. And that's where the discard might come in quicker with somebody who is very empathetic and very people pleasing, which is quite interesting as well. But yeah, people's whole temperaments, their outlook, everything can change for the worse. I've seen some, you know, it's happened to me. I've lived through this experience as well, which was what prompted me to do all the research over the years, and dealing with clients and just seeing what were once really vital. That's what they'll say. I was really enthusiastic. I was really happy. I was really outgoing. And now I don't want to go outside. I don't want to leave the house. I don't want a big job anymore because I don't think I can do it. And that's men and women. Men and women. You know, so.
And I think when I was looking at the research before, it's not just usually to one sex or population. It can be men, women, etc. It's not one single kind of population, is it? If you kind of look at it.
No, and it does tend to be 80-20. Funny how that 80-20 comes up in all kinds of things, doesn't it? It does tend to be 80% men, 20% women. You know, looking at the basic research, but women can do it as well. I've come across a couple of female narcissists as well. So
So just a couple of questions, probably maybe an easy one. So will a narcissist get worse over time? Do they get worse and worse over time? Does it get, or is it just always? I'm trying to explain it in Steve's world. Do they stay as they are and just carrying on always that cycle, or does it get worse and worse and worse?
They tend to always be like, they don't get better.
Right.
They don't get better. Very, very rarely. You see, I've also spoken to therapists about this who are actually narcissistic personality trait aware, because if you think sometimes if they think they're going to lose somebody and you're going to walk away from a personal perspective, they might say, oh yes, okay, let's go to therapy, let's go to couples therapy, but they're going to manipulate the therapist if the therapist doesn't know about narcissism. You know, so will they get better? Probably not. Will they seek out help? Probably not. It's rare, although you can find a few on the internet who like to share, you know, they're more enlightened, but then you've got to ask, why are they now sharing all of these experiences? Because they're narcissists and they want the attention. But no, it just tends to go on in cycles. And like you said, when the ultimate discard happens, so when they really have had enough, or you leave from a work perspective, you leave, or they force you out of the organization, they're going to move on to somebody else. It never stops. It never stops. And if they do it at work, they do it at home as well.
Right. So it doesn't switch off.
Personality type.
There's no
doesn't switch off.
Yeah.
No. They are what they are in any environment.
Right. And moving into now, Joe. So we've looked at kind of what the narcissist is, the gaslighting, the kind of the circle that we would experience. What should we do if we're experiencing narcissistic behavior? How can we cope, or what should we do as an individual?
Okay, couple of things. So we have a term called grey rock when dealing with narcissists. Grey rock, if you think of an inanimate object, a grey rock just sits there. It is completely uninteresting. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't do anything. It just is. So what we recommend is you go grey rock. So they are going to goad you. That's another thing that they do. They like to goad you, pick at you. Because don't forget, in the data mining phase, in the love bombing phase, they learn everything about you. They learn all the things you love, all the things you hate, because they had those long conversations with you. So they know they know where your Achilles heel is and what to do about it. So with grey rock, you don't rise to it, because don't forget, they are after the narcissistic supply. That's what they want. They want you to feel bad. They want to get a rise out of you. So you just be grey rock. You be factual. You tell them what they need. I'm not saying that you be obstructive from a work perspective. You do not do that. You give them what they need. So you facts, figures. If they start to want to talk to you about personal things, that's where you kind of draw a boundary. I'm not discussing that right now. Here's the information you wanted. Put everything in writing. So whenever you have a conversation with them, of course, you're only sticking to facts about work. You then go back and you send them an email. Anything that happens, you keep detailed notes, dates, times, who else was there, and you make detailed notes, because if at some point it does escalate and you feel the need that you're going to have to tell your manager about it, you need dates, facts, times, evidence. Because without that, I've seen so many people say, well, I've been to HR and I've been to my boss and he doesn't believe me, because this person's so charismatic that everybody thinks they're wonderful, and they can't possibly see it must be, it must be you, because we think he's wonderful or she's wonderful. So those facts, the evidence is absolutely vital. And for your own mental health, stay in grey rock. Don't let them rile you. Always, only where you can, try and talk to them where there are other people around, and just stick to being very, very factual. Boundaries are hard, because we've already let all our boundaries go, usually during the love bombing phase. So it's putting those back in place. So it's about, I don't want to talk about family. I don't want to discuss that. Now, they're not going to like that, because how dare you? But then you go back to that grey rock.
And it's I always like nice metaphors that people can relate to. But that grey rock is one of those ones of being safe, not moving. And I love the bit there about not being goaded, because in theory, that's what they're looking for, is excuse the terminology, like a rise from you, something to come back with to feed that supply, and then they can use it against you again. But I just love that kind of, and also the bit for a lot of people, even when I worked back in my banking industry, saying to people, you need to have the facts, keep the facts and keep it kind of simplistic, rather than going back with opinion again, because then that feeds the kind of narcissistic kind of temperament of it. So there's more things to latch on to, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Because I mean, this goading thing that they do, once you know about this and you start to set boundaries, they're not going to like that. And that's where the goading will be. Because if you've started to, even if you've started to go, I can't do this anymore, I'm just so tired of arguing with this person, I'm so tired of having to, and you start to be, oh, whatever you want to do. Yeah, you're right. When you start to do that, they're going to want to goad you, because they're missing their narcissistic supply. So if they can say things to you to wind you up, and you explode, all of a sudden as well, one of the things that they'll do is go, see, I said you were this, I said you were that, it's you. Because they're going to wind you up until you finally explode, and they're going to turn it around and say, you're the abuser, not me.
Yeah. And that's the bit,
classic.
The definitely experience I've noticed over the years about in kind of my mind, and when I've worked with people before, is that they're looking for something that then to turn it back and go, you're the one that's caused these issues or problems, not me. and that's what they're looking for. But I just love that metaphor. So if anyone can take away today, I just think that grey rock is a real kind of a good place to be and not be goaded. And it's hard though, Joe, isn't it? It's hard not to be goaded because they use those words that they took from the love bombing phase.
They use all the stuff they data mined.
Yeah.
You know, all the stuff that they got you to tell them while your guard was down because you thought that they were this wonderful person. They're going to use all of that, and that is the word, is goading. They're going to nitpick and nitpick and nitpick and nitpick and nitpick until you explode, and then you're the abuser. One of the questions that I do get asked a lot by people is, do you think I might be the narcissist?
Really?
You know, when they've come out of a narcissistic relationship, whether it's a personal one or a work-related one, because the narcissist will have put that in their mind at some point. You know, you're the abusive one, not me. It's them it's you, blah, blah, blah. And the one thing through all of my research on this is, if you're asking whether you're the narcissist, you ain't the narcissist.
Yeah. Definitely.
You know, if you're bringing that to somebody and wanting to talk about it, you are not the narcissist.
Yeah. And that's that confusion that they put into your mind of going, is it me, or that kind of purpose. And just coming up to the last question I've got, Joe, because you and I think we could talk. We were even talking before off air, but it's a fascinating subject. But how do you set healthy boundaries? Because we can't all say that we can't work with a narcissist and all, but how do we set healthy boundaries?
Well, it's difficult because there is no such thing as healthy,
right,
with a narcissist. It is write it down for yourself. You don't even have to share it with them. Write it down for yourself, what I am willing to talk to this person about and what I'm not. And so that is so you're not even necessarily going to want to communicate that, you know, these are my boundaries, because they're going to laugh at you. And then that will wind you up, and then they'll get their narcissistic supply. So again, we're going around in that loop. What I would suggest is get very, very clear on what you are willing to discuss with them and what you're not. And the minute they cross over that boundary, you go grey rock and say, I'm not discussing that. Can we get back to what we were talking about? And it has to be that brutal. And I know for some of us that will feel like, oh, really uncomfortable, because I'm a really nice person and I don't want to feel like I'm treating, and then they're going to turn it around and start saying, what's the matter with you? You're being really mean. But that's the only way to deal with a narcissist. And the other thing that I would say as well is, please raise it with somebody. So have your facts, have all of the dates and the times, and I know it's a pain to have to do that, but if you are in HR, you'll know that's the thing that we say to do with anybody that you're having problems with: dates, times, facts, because HR or your manager will not be able to do anything without that. There still might be, from the webinars that I did before, I did 2 webinars before Christmas on this topic, and there were so many questions. I think we ran over 20 minutes after on each of the sessions. It was like kind of over half an hour on questions. One of the questions was, what if my boss doesn't believe me, or what if HR don't believe me? And one of the things that some people didn't like the answer to that is, we all have a choice where we work. And sometimes for your own health, and I know this is not perhaps the answer people want to hear, but if you've gone all down the right channels and you're still not getting support, your mental health is worth more than anything else. And the longer you stay there, the worse it will get, the worse your mental health will get, and it's going to affect your career anyway. So I know from my experience, I wish I'd got out sooner. And there isn't one other person that's eventually got out that hasn't said, I wish I got out sooner. So I know for some people will be saying, oh, that's a failure, I shouldn't have to leave. And that was some of the feedback that I got. However, it's not quite as simple as that. And we all want to feel that we're valued. We all want to work for a company that has the same values as us. So better leave sooner rather than later and go work somewhere where you're valued and not treated like that.
And that's the bit there, which is so important, that we've all got one life on this planet, and actually to enjoy it and be healthy and look after our mental health is so, so important. And so many people I've seen that have moved on to different roles and different jobs, and they've got back their sparkle and they've got back their kind of enthusiasm again. So for those people out there that going, oh, do you know what, that's failure? It's not. It's
No,
actually go and be healthy, because the other part as well is it's not just you affected, it's your family as well that affect you.
absolutely.
You can't just turn these things off at 5 o'clock at night. Actually, it's then how do you kind of, because your family will pick up if you've gone quiet, freeze in those kind of perspective. So I just think if you are in that difficult position, there is an outlet, and there is also other kind of jobs to look at or to do, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. For me, let's do a reframe on it. I love a good reframe. For me, staying in a place that is making you ill is more of a failure than leaving and
Yeah,
being happy. It is not
yeah,
being defeatist. It is knowing when that is no longer serving you.
yeah,
And there are lots of jobs available, especially at the moment. It's a candidate,
yeah,
no, it's a job rich environment, not a candidate
yeah,
rich environment. So
yeah,
there are more roles than there are candidates, good candidates at the moment. So yeah, um, get out sooner rather than
yeah,
later.
yeah. Now, Joe, we could sit here, I think, go and get a
We
cup of tea and
could.
talk to the cows come home. We could do it quite easily. Can I just say, how can people get hold of you or contact you, Joe? What's the best way to, or kind of to see kind of the information that you share with people? What's the best way?
Very easy, joebanks.net. There is tons of information. I've written extensively about narcissism and bullying. I have a very popular blog on my website, which I update every week. And so, if anybody's interested in one-to-one coaching, if they're interested in career management, because that's another big side of my business, or even I do a lot of online training courses as well. So have a little look at joebanks.net. That's the best place to go.
Well, can I just say, Joe, thank you ever so much for today. I think I've learnt lots today, and I thought I knew about narcissism and work that I've done, but it's been really enlightening. And all I would say to people is please reach out to Joe. But Joe, big, big thank you today. I really, really appreciate it on our podcast. And I'm sure our paths will cross again in the near future.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for bringing me on to talk about a topic that I am very passionate about. I'm sure that came across. Thank you. I appreciate it.